Good evening. Welcome to this evening's edition of the Richard Urban Show. I'm your host, Richard Urban, coming to historic Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. We present news and views from God's point of view. Tonight's topic is God in the public square. And we're going to be talking about this for several weeks. Next week, we'll have on an interview with Philip Sharp, pastor and podcaster of Rage of the Age. Okay, so first of all, I want to congratulate President Trump on a great acceptance speech last night, and I urge you to see it if you haven't seen it. Now, speaking of God in the public square, pretty much we saw in both the Republican and Democrat convention, different mentions where people tried to trot out, like in the Democrats, tried to trot out, their faith in God. To me, it was almost not comical, but kind of sad. I mean, they'd have like a gospel number, and the next thing the moderator would, give some crude, what do you say, pan on President Trump. I don't know. I found it weird, but I did appreciate the way it was presented by President Trump, as we have faith in God as the basis of our nation. So basically, the First Amendment gets a lot of how do you say, misunderstanding. So let's look to start this out at the First Amendment here. So, First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So this gets a lot of misunderstanding or misrepresentation. People typically say there's a wall of separation between church and state, which is a phrase taken from a political letter written by Thomas Jefferson. And they say, whoa, wait, no religion, no God. That's completely false. Thomas Jefferson went to church in the U.S. Capitol. It was not meant to be a discussion of how there would be no religion. There's no establishment of religion. That meant taxing citizens like they did in England to support the Church of England. There was never any intention not to be God in the public square, as is sometimes called, meaning God would not have any, how do you say, public role. Of course, God has a public role, but there's a confusion about how that role can or cannot be expressed. And of course, it can be expressed freely. The point is simply that there should be no establishment of religion. That's a clear point. It doesn't mean there's no religion. And the second point I want to make is it's really not about religion, it's about God. So religion is an expression of people reaching and understanding God. There are many religions, there's probably several thousand different Christian denominations. There's different sects of Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, all kinds of other religions. So Baha'i, with all kinds of religions, unificationism. So basically, religion is people's effort to reach to God, but God is God. So often those who discuss these matters, meaning the matter of God in the public square, and how, are we a secular state? Are we a religious state? I'd say we're definitely not a religious state. There's no like establishment of religion, but we are a God-centered state. That's very clear. And so those kind of scholars point to two documents. One is the Declaration of Independence, and in fact, President Lincoln also pointed toward that himself. What does the Declaration of Independence say? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So there we see that rights come from God. So if you don't recognize God, how can you recognize the foundation of rights? You can't. So is God religion? No. God is God. God is the founder of the universe. So this is a seminal document. It's not a religious document, but it's certainly a God-centered document. The second thing these kind of scholars who study God in the public square point to as like penultimate expression of how do you say, not religion, but God in the public square, done in a very good way, according to scholars, is Lincoln's second inaugural address given at his second inauguration, obviously, in on March 4th, 1865. So, and that you find inscribed on and in the Lincoln Memorial. So there it again refers to God, not religion. Both read the same Bible and prayed to the same God, and each invokes his aid against the other. It may seem strange that any men should dare to ask the just God's assistance in wringing their bread from the sweat of other men's faces, but let us judge not, that we be not judged. The prayers of both could not be answered. That of neither has been answered fully. The Almighty has his own purposes. Quote, woe unto the world because of offenses, for it must needs be the offenses come, but woe to that man by whom the offense cometh. Unquote. If we shall suppose that American slavery is one of those offenses, which in the providence of God must needs come, but which having continued through his appointed time, he now wills to remove, and that he gives to both North and South this terrible war as the woe due to those by whom the offense came, shall we discern therein any departure from those divine attributes which the believers in a living God always ascribe to him? Fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray, that this mighty scourge of war may speedily pass away. Yet, if God wills that continue until all the wealth piled by the bondsman's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, until every drop of blood drawn with a lash shall be paid by another drawn with a sword, as was said 3,000 years ago, so still it must be said, the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. So that is an excerpt, actually a good half of Lincoln's second inaugural address. So here again, we see the concept that our nation is founded upon God. It is God who brings the standard of right and wrong, but yet it's not a religion Lincoln is referring to. So let's not confuse religion with God, okay? Of course we have to bring religion to public square. Of course religion matters, because that is the very foundation of good and evil of our nation. Now, secularists may argue otherwise, but I assert that it is. And the founders of this nation agree with that. And in fact, that is the case. So we need to, recognize principles, God's principles, operating on a world level. So I would say one difference perhaps between my viewpoint and other Christians, I'm a follower or a studier or believer, or how do you say, we call tribal messiah, or person who's working for the kingdom of God. And I have been educated and taught by Reverend Sun Myung Moon, who lived from 1920 to 2012. So in that, I believe in and see and understand a supra, S-U-P-R-A, a supra-denominational movement, a family movement. So we don't need really religion. We can do without religion. We need God. Okay? Religion and God are two different things. Religion is a way that people reach to God. It isn't God. You can certainly be assured of that. I mean, which God is it then? If there are 4,000 different gods, and if you, that is, if you're Christian, and if you're not, there's dozens and hundreds of other religions. No, God is one. So how do we understand God? So that's where Reverend Moon brought really an understanding. I understand Reverend Moon as the true parent, True parent, meaning like an example of a true man, um, who, with his wife formed a true family. So he formed many organizations. The most core of them are the Family Federation, World Peace and Unification. So, so he emphasized godly families. We need a movement of godly families. So those families could come from numerous denominations, even from numerous faiths, if they can agree on the basic principles. Like I've been talking about some of the basic principles of the kingdom of heaven. Core among these are the principle of sexual abstinence before marriage. I just had a 4-part series on that. You can find out a lot more about that on our website at visionroot.org and urbanlifetraining.org. And also fidelity and faithfulness in marriage, and the sacrament, we call it blessed marriage, godly marriage. So these are core principles of God, you know. And as President Trump was right to point out, it's not government that will save us. We need God's will. And ultimately, that's what Jesus came to do, form this kind of true family. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to form a family himself. So we could talk a lot more about that. But the main point I'm trying to bring is, as Christians and even as people of faith, Christians, Jews, Muslims, other faiths, we need a philosophy that explains these godly principles clearly. And Christianity itself is not like an ideological framework. But ungodly people have ideological frameworks. We know of them: Marxism, communism, and in fact, the Black Lives Matter movement. And I'm talking specifically about the BlackLivesMatter.com website, where they say their goal is to destroy the nuclear family, as was pointed out during the Republican convention. And also, they're all for LGBTQ and all kinds of other formations of so called families. So guess what? This isn't centered on God. And also, those women are self-proclaimed that they are Marxists. Well, Marxists deny the existence of God. So we can see that this can never be a philosophy that is in line with the founding principles of the United States. And that's why you see chaos throughout the United States on the streets. Do you see any evidence among the so-called protesters and rioters? And I'm talking, well, okay, anyway, you answer yourself. Do you see the evidence of kindness and goodness? Okay, sure. Some people who are promoting those causes, are no doubt good people of various faiths. But I'm talking about what they say on their website. I'm talking about the people, like I was just looking the other day, and guess what? Two white women, coincidentally, I didn't know this. I just happened to see this. They're the ones who set that Wendy's in Atlanta on fire. So apparently they send the female people like that out. I guess maybe they figure people won't be as upset or likely to, punch them out if they're females. They're the ones who are throwing bricks through the Wendy's window and tried more than 10 times and ultimately burned it down. And now, of course, they're wanted for all kinds of charges. What the heck? What does this have anything to do with Black Lives Matter? Nothing. These are Marxists, anarchists. These are people who want to destroy our country. It has zero, nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. And we see this repeating again and again and again. Nothing, 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 nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. Look at the people who spoke at the Republican convention, like Clarence Henderson. He's one of the original Woolworth protesters, in 1960. These people are true people of faith. They don't want anything to do with these Marxist and socialist communist promoters of Black Lives Matter. That's nothing. That's what I mean. Is that's nothing. The Black Lives Matter thing is just a catchphrase they're using for their own purposes. You know, I mean, how many of the Black Lives Matter protesters would agree with these white anarchist women? And I don't really care what color. I'm just pointing that out because they're the ones who smashed up and destroy, most of the time smashing up and destroying buildings, and then other people who are of low character follow suit and follow up on it. you know what a convenient strategy. It's not a convenient strategy. And you know what? People aren't stupid. People see through that. That's why people should make a choice. And that's why you see good people like Kim Klashik in Baltimore running, on other tickets other than the Democrat ticket. So we really need a God-centered viewpoint. And also I want to point out, before I close out, it's not left or right. There are godly people in both parties. I mean, a lot of the things the Democratic Party supports, especially like the abortion up till birth, a lot of people don't. I don't see how people of faith can believe in that. But there are some Democratic candidates who are still like pro-life. But so that's hard to reconcile. But overall, it's really not a left or right thing. It's a God or no God thing. So we can immediately judge and see the whole Black Lives Matter movement. Again, I'm not talking about that catchphrase, but I'm talking about the movement itself as described on their website, has nothing to do with God. In fact, it's an anti-God movement. So we need an ideology that can refute that. And that's what Reverend Moon brought. And Reverend Moon was widely initially accepted, did bring great victories. But a lot of people now don't know about his philosophy, or they have ignored it. They didn't want to receive it. I don't know, for whatever reason. Maybe they didn't like his race. Maybe they thought they knew more about it. Maybe they thought they knew Jesus and he didn't. I don't really know what the problem was, but I've been studying about for 44 years, so I urge you to check into it and find out more. That's certainly what informs me as a podcaster, as a person, of course, as a family man, is that philosophy. And this is a philosophy like I feel comfortable going to any church. Yeah, I mean, sure, I'm not going to go to a church that promotes something that's evil. But what I'm trying to say is, I don't mind, like I have an idea, and like in our organization, Urban Life Training, one of my projects was like we had a thing called the Pure Fun Events. So that was where we would bring the youth, who were encouraged to stay abstinent, to different events, like say bowling at the bowling alley. We'd have usually college age mentors who would come. So I invited other ministers to come. Well, I don't mind if they're Baptists, or whatever, and say they want to witness to them about Jesus Christ's death and resurrection. I don't believe that's wrong. I don't tell them no. Don't tell them about that. See, this kind of parochial attitude toward faith is what's, I mean, it's really wrong. It's really harmful. Oh, I have my church. I have my Jesus. We don't need you. Goodbye. What kind of attitude of faith is that? And believe me, I've heard that plenty of times because I'm involved in neighborhood ministry. I've heard that dozens, if not 100 plus times. I have my faith. Goodbye. I mean, most people are polite. They don't say it like that. But that's about what it amounts to. This is against the founding spirit of America. And it's also against the spirit of the First Great Awakening with Jonathan Edwards. He believed in a disinterested benevolence, which I've talked about before. You do good things because they're good. You do good things because you love God, not because you want a candy cane or money or something like that, or some perk, you know? So I don't know. I think people really need to wake up to what's going on, see the battle as God versus no God, and also they need to study and about the God-centered philosophy, which Reverend Moon called Godism, or sometimes parentism, referring to God as like the parent, and also the concept of true parents, as we need to be true parents, and also like a head wing, not the left wing or right wing. And of course, the head wing is God, and that is really the founding of our nation. So of course, God should be in the public square and should inform everything. President Trump is 100% right about that. We're not a secular state. If you want a secular state, then go with the Marxist philosophy of the Black Lives Matter website. I mean, where, it's LGBTQ and destruction of the nuclear family. If that's what you want, go right ahead. I mean, go to Venezuela or wherever you want to live where they're trying to practice that philosophy. There's no peaceful state on earth. I don't think you'll find any. Anyway, the point about it is we need a God-centered philosophy, and Reverend Moon brought that philosophy, and it's here. It's here for everyone to take advantage of, and you don't need to change your faith. Just learn about it and, accept it and study it yourself. So, God does need to be in the public square, and we'll be talking more about this next week. We'll have an interview with Philip Sharp. We look forward to that. We'll get his take on it. He's a Christian pastor and podcaster. So, until that time, do be blessed. and do exercise your rights and opinions in the public square. I am your host, Rich Urban, reporting to you from historic Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. Until next time, God bless and good night, and be blessed.